I'd like to call your attention to the gospel recorded by Luke, 23rd chapter, the 39th through 43rd verse. And it says, "And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be the Christ, save thyself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing amiss. And he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom." Now, this is not going to be a sermon about the resurrection and all of that stuff. It is just about that phrase, when thou comest into thy kingdom. And that's our subject. When you come into your kingdom. Now, this is the kind of sermon that people probably preach at Easter time, but you can see that this is nowhere near Easter time. So I'm not going to talk about the kinds of things that people would talk about during that time of season. I just want to talk about that one phrase, when thou comest into thy kingdom. And what are the ramifications of such a statement to Jesus at a time like this? When thou comest into thy kingdom. Now remember, two of the disciples had said to Jesus one day, when thou comest into thy kingdom, give us seats, one on the right hand and one on the left. So it was commonly believed that Jesus was going to establish some kind of kingdom. They thought at one time, or most of them thought, that it was going to be a military kingdom. So these folk who wanted to be a part of some kind of military coup and be the leaders and the powerful people in the military kingdom automatically drew to Jesus as long as they thought that he was going to do that. But that's not what Jesus was about. This man, seeing that that was not going to be the case, you can't think that a person is going to be coming in some kind of military kingdom when the military is putting him to death and he is dying. And this man says, this thief, this condemned man says to Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, remember me. When you come into your kingdom. Now, that's a very powerful statement, because it makes some suggestion that this man understood certain things. He understood that sometimes coming into the kingdom can have very, very powerful impact on people. Because sometimes position can cause people to forget condition. Position can cause people to forget condition. People can get in a new position and cause them to forget their old condition. That's tragic. When people let position cause them to forget previous conditions. You see, one of the reasons that affirmative action didn't work any more effectively for black people in America is that the folk who benefited and got into new positions forgot the folk that they left in the old condition. You see, every condition sometimes produce people to go up and rise above the condition, to come into new positions and come back to see about the folks in the condition. So this man understood all of that, and he trusted that Jesus, when he got into his new position, would not forget folks in the old condition. Because the people who've been in that condition ought to have more sympathy for that condition and the folk in that condition than anybody else. So Jesus was in the same condition as this man. They were all hanging on crosses. They were all dying. And this man says, when your condition changes to a new position, remember me. You see, Joseph was in a condition in prison, and he helped a man retain or regain his position. And Joseph says to this butler, when you get back into your position, remember my condition. And as soon as he got back into position, he forgot Joseph's condition. So this man says to Jesus, when you get into your kingdom, don't forget about us. No Christians are saying that to Jesus now. Oh, one of the sad things is that when the Christian comes to the conclusion that he or she has been forgotten by Jesus, it's a terrible feeling to feel that you have been forgotten. Even Jesus, when he was on the cross, said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Have you forgotten about me? So that's a terrible feeling to think that you have been forgotten by somebody who was supposed to keep you in remembrance when they got into this position. So this man understood how tempting it was, how absolutely intriguing it was to be in great positions, to become so fascinated with the dance and the glamour of the new position that you forget to watch the clock. You forget I used to call this when I'm lecturing the Cinderella syndrome. You get so caught up in the dance and the party that you forget to watch the clock. You forget what time it is. So this man understood that can happen to people, and he was trusting that it did not happen to Jesus. That when Jesus got into his new position, he wouldn't forget about it. When he got into this position, he wouldn't forget this earthly condition down here. You see, Jesus came to our condition to identify with it and come to empathize and sympathize with it and relate to it better than anybody else, so that he could always remember what it was like to be down here dealing with what we deal with. That's why folk can say nobody knows the troubles I see. Nobody else. Nobody knows but Jesus. Because he came down here. He went through some of the agony that we go through. He went through the rejection that we go through. He went through the suffering that we go through. He went through all of the pain that we go through, so they can say he understands us better than anybody else in heaven even, because he dwelled among us. And he understands our condition, and we're trusting that he won't let his position in heaven make him forget about our condition on earth. So he said one day, I'll go and prepare a place for you. I'm going to get me a new position. But when I get that new position, I'm never going to forget about your condition. It's a wonderful thing, I got a letter, a card this week from a woman in Fulton, and she sent me this card. She said, "Thank you for my money for medicine. It comes a good time for the first of the month." And she said, "Reverend, you are sweet and loving. You are a sweet and loving person. We all were surprised by the big gift that you gave the church." Well, this woman used to make sure that I had my dinner every Sunday when I was a little poor preacher up there. Now she's up in age. She's 87 years old. And she's on medication and all that stuff. So every few weeks I send her a check to help with her medication. And that church, I gave them that money, and she's thanking me for that, because I made a commitment a long time ago to the folks. I never told them this verbally, but I made a commitment to the folks that I never let any future position make me forget those folks that I left in that old condition. I had that model. I remember when my older brothers moved to town and left us down on the plantation. They moved to town and got jobs that they went to every day in spite of the weather condition. We could only work when the weather allowed us. So all those weeks when it rained and we hadn't gone to the fields, we had no money. But my mama had two sons in town in a different position. And all those weeks when it hadn't rained, when it had rained and we had no money, my mama would dress up on Saturday afternoon. We had no telephone. This was a long time ago. Almost nobody had telephone in the black people. We had no telephone and no way to get in touch with my brothers in Greenville. Yet my mama would dress up on Saturday afternoon or early evening and get her pocketbook and set it by the chair and stick a gun and put it in her mouth and sit by the window and wait on my brothers. And they would put their money together that they were saving for us. And one of them would come down to pick mama up, and I would go to town with her. And so she would sit by the window. And then after a while, she would say, so we could look and see the car. And she said, "Here come Bob, give him my pocketbook. Let's go." Because those boys in that position in town did not forget our condition out in the country. So I learned from that you never let your new position cause you to forget your old condition. Now, I just want to talk, I don't have anything organized that well to say. I didn't use this extra hour all that well, probably. But I just want you to understand that this man understood that the temptation of getting to a new condition and forget about, a new position and forget about your old condition. And he trusted that Jesus was not going to do that. Don't do that, Jesus. Don't do that to us. Don't get up there with your angels and your Father and get wrapped up in the heavenly atmosphere and forget about me down here. So this man, actually, it's kind of interesting that he says to Jesus, when you come into your kingdom. He says, it's all right to remember somebody when you're in the condition they're in. It's all right to remember somebody when you're broke like they're broke. It's all right to look into your teenage young love at the eyes of your young lover when both of y'all are struggling and say, I love you and I'll love you for the rest of my life. I'll cherish you. And then you get in a new position. Make a few more thousands of dollars than he makes or she makes. And then you say, I could move faster if I get rid of these folks from this old condition. Now, you don't know folks like that, but I've known folks like that in my life. That let position make them forget about their old condition and forget about the folks that's been in their old conditions. So this man said to Jesus, don't you do that. I'm trusting you not to do that. And then there's something else about this little when you come into your kingdom. There's something else about this. I think it's kind of interesting. Is that this man is something that we ought to all learn how to do. Very important Christian concept and attitude that every Christian needs to learn to do what this man was able to do. Now, this was a sinner. This was a terrible person. He said, we deserve what we are getting. Well, it's actually two things. It just came to me. Two things that we ought to do. One is, we ought to realize and accept that the stuff that we gotten ourselves into is what we deserve. When we actually deserve it. Well, I want to blame somebody else. No. This man says, we are just two old rotten sinners. We deserve what we are getting. This man has done nothing to deserve what he's getting. That's a wonderful thing. Not blaming anybody. Not blaming the neighbors. It's not blaming the system. Not blaming anything. It's me, oh Lord. I messed my own life up. And I'm in the shape I'm in because of that. This man on the cross admitting that. But here is what he was able to do. That every Christian ought to be able to do. And if you don't remember anything else, I see my cousin continues to write during my sermons, and I have told people not to write. I'll be lecturing in Virginia tomorrow, Tuesday. They are educators and stuff, and all these people, they can write. And church, I was going to let him write the first few weeks till he gets used to the whole idea of not writing. But he can write today. But one of the things that this man was able to do, that every Christian ought to be able to do, is this. He was able to look through the gory and see the glory. Oh my God. He was able to look through or beyond the glory and see the glory. Everybody else around this man was caught up in the glory. Oh, it was a glorious sight. Mary and Martha probably were caught up in the glory. The disciples were caught up in the glory. They saw the nails in his hand and the blood running down. They saw the crown of thorns that were placed mockingly upon his head, and the blood running down. They saw the holes in his side made by the spears that pierced him. It was a glorious sight. And this man was in that picture. And he looked beyond the glory and saw the glory. You know, glory can scare Christians. A few years ago, I was called to the hospital to go and see one of the members of the church in Troy. And I went, she was in the hospital not far from my house, and I went to the hospital, and they had taken her in for some kind of cancer examination and surgery, and they cut her open and saw a glorious sight and said she'd be dead in 6 months. 2001 was the time that this happened. And they called us in the room. And there she was in the bed. All these tubes attached to her and these machines. And it was a glorious sight. And it was tempting to see the glory and forget the glory. She was supposed to live 6 months. That was over 6 years ago. She is still living and doing fine because of the glory of Jesus Christ. So this man was able to look through the glory and see the glory. He didn't let the destruction of the moment dampen his hope for the future. He looked beyond that crown of thorns and saw a crown of gold. He looked beyond that cross of shame and saw chariots, saw Jesus riding on clouds. He looked beyond that glory and saw the glory. And that's a message for every Christian. There's going to be some glory in your life. Oh, there's glory in the country. And it's tempting to just get caught up in the glory. When those kids at Virginia Tech got killed, I sat on my steps lamenting, caught up in the glory for a while. And people want the preacher to tell us what to do and stuff like this. And last week, when kids burned up in North Carolina, I think, and people there, tell us what to do about this. These are glorious sights. What do we do? And I say to them today, look beyond the glory and see the glory. This man is saying to Jesus, I'm not letting the situation you're in today make me forget about the situation you said you were going to be in. I still believe that you're going where you said you were going to go. I still believe that you said that if they tear this temple down, you'd rebuild it in 3 days. I still believe that. I still believe that you are the Son of God and that you are going to go back to heaven as you said. And one of these days, you're going to come back like you said you were. And I want you to remember me when that happens. I knew this woman who died a couple of years ago at the tender age of 97. I used to go downtown St. Louis and visit her and her husband. Her husband was sickly and he was actually terminally ill and wasn't going to get any better. And this woman was just a wonderful, wonderful lady, and she just took care of her husband so wonderfully. So she'd always have me coming down there to eat the breakfast or dinner or something, and I'd always go. And whenever I went to visit people, they always included a meal in my visit. And sometimes I'd go there, and they had this big window that faced the east. And sometimes she would be in that window. She was about 80 then. And sometimes that she'd be in that window and with a big smile on her face. And I said to her, Sister McCoy, why are you looking out of that window smiling? She said, sometimes when I see a cloud, I can just picture Jesus on that cloud coming back to get us. Oh, she said, I want to be ready. She was one of those women that always looked beyond every situation and saw the glory of Jesus. And that's what the church is challenged to do at all times, regardless of what you're going through, how desperate your situation is, how dangerous it is, how depressing it is, how much glory is involved in it. You ought to take a lesson from this man on the cross, that he was able to look beyond all of that and believe Jesus' promise. Here was a man died, and Jesus, as far as they knew, was dying. This man hadn't been one of the disciples. He hadn't been around him. But it must have been something that he saw in Jesus, even in that situation, that told him, oh, this is no ordinary man. You better hook up your wagon to him, because he's going somewhere. Oh, that's what I did back in Mississippi all those years ago when I was a child. I hooked my wagon to Jesus because I knew that he was going somewhere. And after all these years, I'm happy with my decision. And as the folk back there would say, I wouldn't take nothing for my journey now.